So, a couple of days ago, I finished this amazing book by the thoroughly, phenomenally incredible Roger Zelazny. This Immortal. And I'm going to say a word about the cover first. As you can see, we've got an old 60s to 80s style cover art, and I love cover art. This particular illustration is by Melvin Grant. While I love the cover in terms of classic science fiction art, I'm not sure it's that suitable for the book. It seems to combine too many things. Your main character has blonde hair, and the main character in the novel, Conor Mcnamicus, is described as Greek. There's classically handsome elements to this figure which make no sense given the character, and he's blue. So there are blue characters in this book. They are vegans, and I don't mean people who do not eat animal matter. I mean aliens from Vega, I think it's Vega 5, and they are described as blue. They've got a few other interesting manifestations as well. Their breathing seems to occur inward around about the head area, assuming that they're human, and one gets the impression they're very lightly sketched, but one gets the impression that they're only marginally humanoid in features. Their outbreaths happen at the bottom of their rib cage, and their laughter is described like a billy goat dying, I think. Anyway, vegans. Vegans are blue. Main character is not. Cover art, and that's all I'm going to say about it. This is not the original cover art, by the way. This book is published by Methuen Paperback in 1985, which is relevant because of the history of the book itself. When Zelazny first wrote it, it was rejected by the first publisher he sent it to, who I bet is kicking themselves, since it tied with Frank Herbert's Dune for the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1966. So this Immortal was initially published, serialized, in two parts, as an abridged version in the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction did I say that right? The Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction. In October, November of 1965, under the title ... and Call Me Conrad ... Now, the abridgment that was done for the serialized magazine, the editing wasn't done by Zelazny, it was done by the editor. And I know that it cut out a couple of thousand words, but apparently it also added a few words in. And that's relevant to this copy because the edits, the words that were edited out were put back together when restored, as they put it, when it was turned into a paperback publication for Ace Books. And the title was changed then to This Immortal. And Zelazny for a while didn't realise that not everything that had been the serialised version was in the newly restored version until, I feel like it was in the 80s. It was found that it was missing a bit, and then it was all restored. So I should have everything that belongs in these stories in this book. Now, regarding the title, when it was published as a paperback, it got called This Immortal. The serialized title was And Call Me Conrad. I'm torn regarding the title. Zelazny apparently preferred And Call Me Conrad. What's that word? Eponymous, I think, when a title refers to itself. Anyway, he preferred the And Call Me Conrad, and it's, as a title, it's more relevant to the content of the book. But I can see where the editor would think And Call Me Conrad isn't a really catchy title. This Immortal is a really catchy title. I can see why they used it. On the other hand, I don't love how much the title This Immortal gives away. And I don't love the fact that what it gives away isn't necessarily true. It sets you up with certain illusions and possibly delusions about the content of the book and about our main character, Conor Mcnamicus. Now, a tiny bit about the plot, and it's tough to talk about the plot of this because in many ways the plot doesn't actually give you a good understanding of the experience of reading the novel. The overlying plot is that Earth, this is a future Earth, which has been devastated by nuclear war. It now has a whole heap of hotspots, normally in areas that used to have large population centres. The entire population of Earth is now estimated at around about 4 million. Most of the land masses are overrun by mutated life forms, which are very interesting. I love the mutated life forms. And worse, when the nuclear war happened, a lot of Earth's population fled off planet. Some of them went to colonies that already existed. I'm going to say Mars and Venus, but I could be wrong about that. Mars definitely, not sure about the other one. And then a lot of them fled to worlds that were owned by the vegan civilization. Again, not someone who rejects cow milk. A blue alien from planet Vega 5. I think it's Vega 5. When the expats living on these planets are apparently a combination of expatriate, refugee, and definitely a second-class citizen. But the government of Earth is considered to be a government in exile on one of these outer planets, and they have elected the head of the government who operates on Earth. Now, Conor Mcnamicus is actually a government employee in that he is the head of, or possibly the only creator of, a department of arts, history, monuments, and so forth. And in that capacity, he is called back to the government from what is essentially his honeymoon. He's been enjoying an extended holiday sailing on the Mediterranean, Aegean Islands. He's just married a beautiful young Greek girl called Cassandra, which is relevant to this plot in that he starts there perfectly happy with her. And I'm going to read you a little bit of right at the beginning of the book regarding that. Cassandra has premonitions and dreams which are ignored, much like the original Cassandra's visions and dreams were ignored. So Conrad is called back to become the guide for this vegan, okay, come on, who wants to tour the Earth. He wants to tour the Earth because he claims he's writing a book, but that is not so much believed. Conrad himself is very reluctant to protect this alien visitor, but also included in the party a number of higher up government style people who are touring with them, a couple of which definitely include a group of Earth rebels and an old comrade in arms of Conrad's who he knows is an assassin. Hassan is apparently an authorized assassin, but he has been hired as a bodyguard to guard the alien. Conrad suspects that the rebels want to kill the alien, and that might be what Hassan is really there for. During the journey, okay, come on, he comes to suspect that Hassan is actually meant to assassinate him as well. We travel through a lot of different hotspots. We see some pretty amazing action, and the end, I'm not even going to bother saying what the end is. I'm sure it's somewhere out there on the internet. The true beauty of this book, however, is in the writing. Now, Zelazny's writing was always full to brimming of stuff. When I first read this, I didn't get a lot of the references. This is one of the books that first got me into reading Greek mythology, but I didn't know much about it when I started. So most of the Greek mythology references I now get as an adult, or at least some of them. I don't know the ones I don't get. But as a kid, I didn't. There were other references that I didn't get when I was in my early teens. There's one point where Conrad retreats to his tent, turns on the cooling unit, and is grateful that Scotland, that wasn't one of the places affected by the nuclear war, and he pours himself a fifth, and teenage me had no idea what he was talking about. Adult me realizes he's talking about scotch, and he's having a drink. There's so much here. Regarding the ecology, as an adult, I appreciate the ecological part of it more. One particularly poignant statement of ecology is spider bats. Spider bats are apparently this huge, dangerous bat. It's an exotic. It's been imported from another planet. It's taken over the Earth because it's got no natural predators. And it is compared in the book to the rabbits in Australia, which as an Australian I enjoyed. Biocontrol over the spider bats is enacted during the book by George, who's an ecologist and scientist on the party. He employs a leech or tick type thing, and as a narrative to the book, the spider bats are on the way out at the end of it. So the mutated animals and humans throughout create a fascinating theme, but the spider bats on the way out, I think, are kind of analogous to the way the vegans are on the way out. The reason the rebel group exists is because after the nuclear war and all the expats fled overseas, most of Earth ended up being owned by vegans. A rebel group was created by a mythological feature called George Karagi. I might be mispronouncing that. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Karagagas? Some Greek name that I can't remember. Yeah, anyway. So this character created a group to make the vegan property go down to nothing, trying to get the vegans off Earth. And then I've lost track of what I was saying. What was I saying? Yes. So there's obvious rebels in the party that Conrad is conducting around the world along with the vegan, and they are trying to take him out. But by the end of the novel, the vegan influence on Earth is severely decreased as well. So I think the spider bats and the vegans are kind of have an analogous plot arc in there. There is so much that I love about this book, like all of them, and it pulled me in from the get-go. The very first page, it starts with, "You are a Calicanzeros," she announced suddenly. I turned onto my left side and smiled through the darkness. I left my hooves and my horns at the office. "You've heard the story. The name is Namikos. And are you going to destroy the world this time around?" I laughed and drew her to me. "I'll think about it, if that's the way the earth crumples." So this is apparently a Greek myth. Not being Greek, I'm not sure, but I believe it probably is because Zelazny has that level of knowledge of mythology and other references. Children born on Christmas in Greece were apparently considered to be of the Calicanzeroi blood. And that means that they are a semi-mythological being that is thought to be there to bring the earth to the end. Our hero or anti-hero, Conor Mcnamicus, is described as an ugly man who has got one shortened leg, where the Calicanzeros are considered to be likely to have horns and hooves and other things. What Conrad actually is never disclosed in this book. He never admits to anything, including things that we as readers know are true, like his previous lives. He never admits to his age, which is, if not immortal, then extremely old, and his history seems to be very varied and very interesting. I could keep talking about this book for ages. As long as it took to read, I could talk about this book because it's so crammed full of references and interesting stuff. I'll make one other point about it, though. Two more points. This is the book that first got me into the Egyptian Book of the Dead because while they are in Egypt, there's a quote from the Book of the Dead that intrigued me about that culture. Conrad, by the way, is having the Great Pyramid of Cheops dismantled, to the horror of the vegan when he finds this out. The other thing is, later in the book, there's a little bit of a discussion about whether the gods of Earth and mankind left Earth when humans migrated to the stars into colonies. Conrad claims with authority that we're given no reason to believe that gods didn't do that, the gods stayed on Earth. And the way it's written makes me wonder if this little segment didn't have something to do with the concept for Neil Gaiman's book American Gods, because it's got a very fluid feel to it in terms of godhood and what they are and how they are separate from mankind. So I'd be fascinated to know if at some stage in his growing up, Gaiman read this book and that is where American Gods originated. I think I'll stop this here. I hope to never forget this book. I hope to reread it regularly. I hope every time I read it, I will always get something more out of it. And there are so many references to so many different sources. I'm pretty confident that that will always happen. If you like classic science fiction, post-apocalyptic or beautiful writing, I'd always recommend Zelazny, but this Immortal is a beauty, and I think more people should read it. And if you have comments,